Why is it recording? Okay, so good to have you all for our last class for this course. Today, we talk about Buddhism in the West. We are making a long jump actually. We just talk about how different Buddhist traditions evolved um, in early history, and then we are jumping all the way to the present time, and particularly a new context for Buddhism, that is the Buddhism in the West. But I hope that you enjoy the reading, because in the reading there's some reference to the way that Buddhism was spread to China and Tibet, and what was the main way that the how Buddhism interacted with the local culture, and how it eventually evolved into uh, uh, the unique form of Buddhism to each culture and each country. So in a way, that reading kind of cover a little bit of what we are missing. But this is a short introductory course, so we are not able to cover the whole history. Um, but you have a general idea, how Buddhism has been evolving in the different regions and different cultures. I think one thing that is highlighted in the reading is that Buddhism is like a seed, and it goes to different environment. But when the seed is becoming a tree, it will get different branches based on the environment and so many other things. And also to kind of celebrate the diversity, but at the same time to see the beauty how Buddhism and the different local cultures and local ideas will come together and form a distinctive form of Buddhism. So that's a very positive, message there. So I like that. But as practitioners, particularly people who are living in the West, and it's still, Buddhism is still taking root. This is more like a period of formation. So Buddhism is in the making in the West. So I would like you to, towards the end of the class, to have some discussion about, is it okay that we simply, let Buddhism to be whatever, it can be with the interaction of, local values and ideas and Western culture? Or do we have to pay some attention and do some conscious um, influence on this, the way that Buddhism is being adapted? So let's talk about that towards the end. Okay, and then because it's still in the making, so you are the makers. It's based on how we interact, how we behave these days will decide the future of the nature of Buddhism in the West. So let me share my screen and start sharing my PowerPoint with you. Can everybody? I hope that everybody can see my screen. Okay. Okay, so just to give you an idea, this is a photo we took a few years ago when we had Vesak celebration in the downtown Pittsburgh. So, we have the Buddha statue and the flag, and also the downtown over there. Just to give an idea how Buddhism is taking slowly growing in the US. Of course, West can include other European countries also, but when I give you examples, I will stick into the US, because that's where I have my experience. So Buddhism has entered different cultures, and we know that there are two things happening here, and Buddhism will transform the local culture, and also in that whole process, Buddhism also will be transformed. It's a very interesting process here. So influencing whatever culture it travels, at the same time being influenced by that culture also. So this two way of influence is important to understand. And so as you read in the materials, when Buddhism come to the West, it really encountered a very different situation. Of course, Buddhism reached West quite late. Late it means in its history. Of course, there were reason for that only after maybe 16th or 17th century that all the countries, different continent, start to communicate so closely and come into contact with each other very closely. So then only that the Eastern religions and philosophies and Western religions and philosophies were able to interact and meet each other. But when Buddhism reaches the West, West has a very strong culture, strong in ideas and development of art and institutions. So it's a very different situation. So this is what I found very interesting in the article that you read. The author, the Professor Garfield, said that the Buddhism is going to be alive well in the West because it draws nourishment not only from the Indian roots, but the Indian roots of the Buddhism, but also from the rain and fertilizers of Western ideas. So that's the kind of combination happening here. So because of that, because it take nourishments from the local, or maybe let's say Western ideas, culture, ideas from the Western culture, and it can nourish, it can be alive. That's his point. I think this is quite true, when you think about all other previous, other Buddhist cultures, I think we had a good example of China. And I think another good example would be Japan, how Buddhism interacted with Japanese ideas and cultures, and how Buddhism influenced Japanese culture and also being influenced by the Japanese culture. And now, the one thing you will see that whenever you travel to different countries where the Buddhist culture is thriving, and each culture will, take Buddhism to be part of their local culture. Like in Japan, of course, other than Shintoism, and they consider Buddhism to be part of their local culture. Now, so if you go to Thailand and Sri Lanka, and if you go to Tibet, it's almost quite difficult for people to take the Buddhism away from the local culture. All the Buddhism kind of travels those countries in different time periods, but somehow the way the Buddhism and local culture has interacted, it has almost become an integral part of the local culture, and it's very difficult to take it away. So that's the kind of process happening here. So the author is saying that a similar process is happening in the US. So it's taking the nourishment from the Western culture and ideas, and it will be like that. Let's come to that point later, and I want to have a discussion on that. But there are distinctive features of the way Buddhism is interacting with the Western culture. There are distinctive, there are unprecedented trends we see here in the history of Buddhism. One is that when you think about different Asian countries, when Buddhism was traveling different cultures, different countries, usually we see a transmission of a single tradition or single lineage to one place at a time. Of course, for example, when Tibetan Plateau received Buddhism, it's a Vajrayana form of Buddhism that went there. When China received different Buddhist transmission through Silk Road or the Middle East, there were a number of transmissions happened to in the case of China, but it's mainly Mahayana form of Buddhism. When Buddhism reaches down south to Sri Lanka and also Southeast Asia like Thailand and Myanmar, it's mainly Theravada form of Buddhism. I think traditionally only in Vietnam we see like Theravada and Mahayana and some schools of Vajrayana Buddhism practicing at the same time. But most cases, transmission of Buddhism occurred in different countries, but mainly most of the cases only one tradition will travel and then that tradition will get established. But what we see in the Western countries is quite different. Of course, now, I mean, the earlier, the transportation and travels are not convenient, and you cannot really have, you cannot really travel a lot, and there are so many challenges. But with the development of travels, development of information technology, and of course, after the industrialization and globalization, and so ideas and teachings can, travel so quickly. And what you find in the Western countries, particularly in the US also, we find the transmission of different traditions at the same time into one place. So it's quite unprecedented, so we find Theravada tradition, Pure Land, Mahayana Pure Land tradition, the Mahayana Zen tradition, and Tibetan lineages. All these teachers can come at the same time to the West and into the same place. I mean, of course, I'm here in Pittsburgh. You already have Buddhist groups and Buddhist centers that belongs to all three traditions. So it's interesting how all these traditions come and transmitted at the same time to the same place. That is quite distinctive when it comes to transmission of Buddhism to the West. And because of that, I think people in the West have the opportunity to learn from various traditions of Buddhism. I think it's a plus point, because ancient time, because of the travel difficulties of travels, and also, also maybe sometime patronage, from wealthy people and maybe the kings. And it was not easy, for people to learn from other traditions. I mean, but there are instances in history, different traditions, people were able to learn from different traditions, and monks particularly traveled to different countries. There are traveling monks who are purposely traveling to different countries to learn other traditions. So such efforts were there. But now the people in the West, of course, not only the West actually now, because of the internet and other things, anybody can learn. But being able to physically be in a place where different physically meet people and go to places where the different traditions are practiced. It is a new opportunity for Western people in the Western countries. At the same time, because of this, there are also other things happening. Traditional Buddhists are also learning from each other. And I have to say that, when I was learning in Sri Lanka, my only encounter with other Buddhist traditions was, the students coming, the monks and other students coming from different countries to study in Sri Lanka. So then I met monks from Mahayana tradition, and not really monks from Tibetan or the Vajrayana tradition, but many monks from Mahayana traditions. They usually come to Sri Lanka to study Buddhism. Because of that, so I met, a few of monks from other traditions. Otherwise, whole my training, I was only exposed to Theravada tradition. But in the university, I was able to meet other monks. And then, of course, when I traveled to Singapore, for the first time, I see different Buddhist centers and practitioners of Vajrayana Buddhism. And I was able to meet those monks and, have interaction with them and talk with them and learn from them. And of course, when I came to the US, we find this rich, diverse Buddhist community in Pittsburgh. Different Tibetan teachers came to Pittsburgh, and there's a Zen Center in Pittsburgh. So I was able to closely work with them and learn from them. So even for my personal life, I think coming to the US has allowed me to learn from other traditions, to meet other monks and the practitioners from other traditions and learn from them. So I think what is happening in the USA is it has becoming a kind of melting pot. The different Buddhist traditions come together and helping each other to grow in a way. So I think it's really a melting pot for different Buddhist traditions. So US has become such a melting pot. And I would like to briefly go to talk about a few key people who are contributed to the transmission of Buddhism to the West. Because those names are not mentioned in the article, I will briefly, quickly mention those people. I think as people practicing or maybe learning Buddhism in the West, we should know who are the key people who made this possible for us. And one thing you need to remember, what was transported to the West was not always the traditional Buddhism. Of course, in 18th century is the period that, Buddhist ideas were coming to the US people. First, Buddhist, and for the first time, Buddhist teachers are coming to the Western countries. This happened in 18th century, towards the 19th century, in 1800s. This period, 1800s, is also very important periods for Buddhism in the Asian countries. You need to remember the 18th and 19th centuries are centuries where the Western powerful countries, nations colonized many parts of Asia. And there are changes happening in the Asian countries also, particularly their Buddhism. So what happened particularly in Sri Lanka, there were, of course, it was a Portuguese and Dutch, and later, British came and colonized Sri Lanka, and then there were Christian missionaries, and then they were publishing things in a way of, of course, criticizing certain traditional aspects of Buddhism, mainly saying that the Buddhists are like backward, traditional, not fitting for the modern time, and also idol worshippers, and all kinds of things. It's common, normal. So because of this criticism, what happened? The local Buddhists, particularly maybe the Buddhist leaders, were trying to reform Buddhism. And there's a very important reinterpretation and reformation of Buddhism happened, particularly in Sri Lanka and also in Japan. And later that reformation also influenced countries like Thailand and Myanmar. And then, so they reinterpreted Buddhism to show that actually this may be a religion, but it sounds very modern. And one way they did it, actually, they compare Buddhism and the Western science, and then argue that Buddhism is more scientific than other, let's say, Christian religion, because the Christianity came as a religion of the colonizer. So like local people, to affirm their own let's say, heritage, they were reinterpreting, definitely they reinterpreted, they try to find scientific terms to explain Buddhism. So in that whole process of reformation interpretation, what happened, that Buddhism was made sensible to a Western audience. So what was transported to the West is not necessarily the traditional religion, but actually a reformed religion. So the key people in that whole process, you see, and you'll be surprised to know that, to have this, what we call the modernized Buddhism, one key person who started this process is actually an American, Henry Steele Olcott. And he was he traveled to Asia, and he established the society called Theosophical Society. And this Theosophical Society was a kind of a society that tried to embrace the teachings of all religions and developing, promoting an idea called theosophy, that every religion has some kind of essence. So there's a special appreciation for Asian religions by this society. He co-founded this society, and then of course he traveled to Asian countries, particularly Sri Lanka. And he's from New Jersey, actually, from Orange County, New Jersey. And he served in the U.S. Army during the Civil War. And then later he served at the Department of War in Washington, D.C. And he was a colonel. And then, of course, later he became a lawyer. He has a nice life story, actually. And then when President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, and he was one of the members of the commission who investigated the assassination. So he was quite a key person. And then, of course, because of his interest for Asian philosophies, religions, he traveled to Sri Lanka. And then he introduced so many reformed ideas. And one is actually to encourage and help Buddhist people to start Buddhist schools, because during the colonial period, there were missionary schools, and it started by different missionary groups, and those schools were producing newly educated, English educated generations of people. And he encouraged Buddhist organizations to start Buddhist schools. And then, so kind of, you provide the education to this Buddhist population, but without necessarily having to change religion, or maybe without necessarily having to go into missionary schools. And also later, he also wrote a textbook for Buddhism. He called it Buddhist Catechism. So, I mean, he has a big influence, I think. And the one other influence is the Buddhist flag. I think in the readings, he was presented almost like, he invented the Buddhist flag. Of course, he has an important role in producing a Buddhist flag, but actually, what is written in the readings is not the full picture. Colonel Olcott played an important role in providing, in designing the Buddhist flag, but he's not the only one actually. The actual historical reason is that during the colonial period, all the Buddhist ceremonies were prohibited. You can't have big ceremonies. So Buddhists were, paid the colonial government to make the Vesak day, the full moon day of the May, a public holiday. The full moon day of the May is the day that Buddhists celebrate the birth of the Buddha, enlightenment of the Buddha, and the passing away of the Buddha. So they were petitioning the colonial government to make the full moon day a public holiday. After a few years of struggle, in the colonial government allowed Buddhists to celebrate, have a ceremony for the Vesak day in 1881. So when the colonial government allowed to have a Vesak ceremony, and there was a committee who's organizing this whole ceremony, and they decided to create a Buddhist flag. And the Olcott was a part of that. I think the main contribution Olcott did to this Buddhist flag is actually, the original flag was longer than this. It's just like a long flag. I think Olcott suggested that, maybe in order to have a flag that can, later promoted as an international, symbol, he suggested the current shape, which is the rectangular shape, not as long as the original version. But this is an important step in modern Buddhism, because of this flag, now Buddhist traditions from different countries, different cultures can be considered themselves as one group. And then, of course, when this flag was designed in Sri Lanka in 1881, they just had the simple intention of celebrating the Vesak. But later, when Buddhist activists were able to travel, and then Olcott also brought this flag to Japan. And then only in 1956 that there was the agreement, and they formed an organization called Buddhist World Fellowship of Buddhists. And during that convention, they accepted this flag as the international Buddhist flag. So there's American contribution to this Buddhist flag. Olcott played an important role. So we can see how Buddhism is shaping differently. And one other key person when he talks about traveling of Buddhism to the Western countries is Anagarika Dharmapala. He's also a Sri Lankan Buddhist activist, a reformist. He worked with Olcott in his early life. And one key thing he did was actually he attended the convention called the World Parliament of Religion, organized in Chicago in 1893. There was a big gathering of different religious leaders from all over the world. It's coincide with the fair that was. I think US was organizing a fair of industrial invention they made. In parallel to that big fair, they also organized what they call World Parliament of Religion. So the Dharmapala traveled from Sri Lanka to represent Buddhism, and there were there were monks from Japan also that represent Buddhism. So these are the two groups who represented Buddhism. So Dharmapala traveled from Sri Lanka and he went to Japan, and from Japan both traveled to Chicago in 1893 to talk about Buddhism, and his presence there and his talk was quite attractive to many audience, and it created interest in Buddhism in the Western countries. And of course, later in later centuries, he traveled extensively to the US and particularly to Hawaii to give lectures on Buddhism. So the formation of idea of Buddhism in early period in late 19th centuries and early 20th centuries was influenced by this preacher called Anagarika Dharmapala. The other key person is called D.T. Suzuki. I think many of you have heard about him, and he is a disciple of Zen Master who came to that World Parliament of Religion together with Dharmapala. But D.T. Suzuki, who's a disciple, he's the one who actually started writing books on Buddhism, and particularly the Zen Buddhism. The first form of Buddhism that was popularized widely in the West and particularly in the US was the Zen Buddhism. That is why we hear the Zen with the word Zen all over the place. So he wrote two important books called Introduction to Zen Buddhism and Zen Doctrines of No Mind. So he's the key person. And then there's also another key person who promoted Korean Zen tradition called Venerable Zhuangxian. He also lived in the US, and then he produced so many disciples, and then also established a lot of centers also. And I think you are also familiar with the trends happen in 1960s and 70s. I think some of you may have lived through that period, or some of you have experienced the effect of that particular period. 60s and 70s was a revolutionary period in the US. There were a lot of experimentation happening, questioning of the mainstream culture, and experimenting with so many things, including drugs. You know that. And there's a group of people called Beat Generation, and I think, you may know better than me that, they influence, they encourage people to study other religions, to explore the alternative explanation of the world, and particularly encouraging people to go beyond the materialist and capitalist kind of worldview. Anybody here is quite knowledgeable about the Beat Generation? Anyone would like to say anything about them?
I feel like Nancy might be able to, of all of us. I didn't live through it, but I've studied it. Yeah. So I think you're pretty much spot on. I mean, they're just,
because I don't want to tell you about, what happened in in this country. You may be more familiar with that.
Yeah, it was fun.
So they also played a very important role in bringing attention to Buddhism. Of course, not only to Buddhism, like Hinduism and other Taoism and other religions too.
Yeah, where I went to school, there was a Buddhist group. There was an ashram that practiced Kundalini meditation, and then
this is in 70s.
Yeah, in Bloomington, Indiana, yeah. IU, Indiana University. Yeah, there was a lot going on then.
Interesting. So it's not only actually Buddhist teachers travel
to.
Yes?
I lived in the 60s.
Okay.
So I was definitely part of that group.
Okay.
I lived in Philadelphia. I also lived in Pittsburgh. And we were the group where love was going to conquer all. And I think it was the first time where in the United States, women were beginning to say, we're not just going to stay home. We're not just going to have children. We're going to be able to do everything. Okay. So it was the generation of, I guess, rebellion in some respects.
Yeah. I think you were that trend of women's rights and also equality also influenced Buddhism also. I think you read in the article, yes.
And I think the other thing that happened at that time was many of us came up in very strict religions. And we were questioning and thinking there has to be more of a thinking process, a loving process. And you know my history, but where I was, there was a lot of racism.
Mm-hmm.
And it shouldn't have been.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was part of the generation that marched for Martin Luther King. And I think we were the ones that just saw that there should be more to life.
So yeah, so you're telling is that during that 60s and 70s, the period that, a lot of changes are happening and people are looking for alternative philosophies and teachings.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah,
Exactly.
Thank you for sharing that. Actually, in that search of alternative, explanation, many people also travel from US traveled to the Eastern countries. So there's a wave of young people, seekers travel to India, China, Japan, and of course, like Southeast Asia, and they were learning from different teachers. So what happened, this wave of teachers came back. They spent years in meditating, learning other religions, other philosophies, and they came back. And I'm going to show you a few key people who came back like that. So there's one person called Joseph Goldstein. You may have read his books, and also Jack Cornfield, and also Sharon Salzberg. And there are many others too. But these three people who traveled to Asia and then learned meditation and came back, and they established what they call Insight Meditation Society in Barre, right? Barre, Massachusetts. And what you see here is that, Insight Meditation Society and their main center, they start to offer meditation classes formally for the first time in the US. And they were rooted in the Vipassana meditation tradition. But what happened later, because of the local facility, and there's so many people start to learn meditation, not necessarily Buddhism, but meditation, but later Buddhism also. But that created the whole new interest in meditation. And then later we will learn what kind of, movements, that Insight Meditation Society created. And of course, we cannot forget about these people when it comes to transmission of Buddhism in the US, and mainly His Holiness Dalai Lama. After he has to, he was exiled, and he reestablished in India after China occupied the Tibet. And he started to travel all over the world, and also some Tibetan refugees also came to the US, and that kind of allowed the door for Vajrayana Buddhism to come. And of course, His Holiness Dalai Lama has been a key person to create the interest in Buddhism in the Western countries, and particularly encourage the researchers and scientific community to do research on the mind and meditation. And one other key person is the Chogyam Trungpa, and he actually lived in the US, and he created, he kind of reformed Buddhism to suit to the Western audience, particularly the Western culture, to US, and he's the one who established what we call Shambhala community, and that is the most widespread Vajrayana community in the US. And of course, later he established Naropa University in Colorado. So there are so many other key people, and we cannot cover all the people, but we cannot ignore this person, a Vietnamese Buddhist teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh. And he left Vietnam during the war. He talked against the war, so he was not allowed to return to the Vietnam even after the war. Of course, he was allowed, a few years ago. And then he established himself in France, and he has a big influence for the Western audience, and of course for many people in the West, in the US also. He kind of showed the relationship between Christianity and Buddhism, and he's the person who wrote the book called The Living Buddha and the Living Christ, and explaining the similarity between the teachings of the Jesus Christ and also the teachings of the Buddha. And he created so much interest in the Western countries. And of course, we cannot forget a person called S.N. Goenka, who kind of organized the meditation practice into more like a course. Traditionally, Buddhism was practiced under teacher, under personal guidance. There's not like a universally structured course. It depends on the person to person. But Goenka is created a structure called 10-day meditation retreat. And he systematized it, formalized it, and of course promoted beyond Asia, particularly the Western countries, and interest for Vipassana meditation was ignited by him. And of course, there's another key person that we are all familiar with, that is Bhante Gunaratana, Bhante Ji, who established the first forest monastery in West Virginia. And his book, Mindfulness in Plain English, was a very key book to promote Buddhism in the US and also the Western countries, introducing Buddhist ideas in a simple language. And so in the article, you see a lot of examples of how Western ideas influence Buddhism, including like, encouraging female ordination and also environmentalism and socially engaged Buddhism. So there are so many examples of that. But I think the article did not have areas how Buddhism influenced the Western culture. So I'm going to give very few examples of that, how Buddhism contributed the Western thought and also Western science. Particularly, Buddhism has a big contribution to psychotherapy. So I have given you 4 forms of psychotherapies that was developed with the influence of Buddhism. Rational emotive behavior therapy was a therapy that was developed after utilizing the Buddhist ideas of analyzing the mind and also the practicing acceptance and compassion. Dialectical behavior therapy, and including both mental exercises and also behavioral changes, and of course acceptance and commitment theory. And these people, psychologists, psychotherapists, and they clearly accept that they have developed their therapies based on Buddhist ideas. So the development of different forms of therapeutic methods will happen because of the influence of the Buddhist idea. So this is like an influence, Buddhism is influencing the Western science and Western psychotherapy. Of course, mindfulness-based interventions. Now, many therapies are using mindfulness as a component of their therapy. So it has become what you call mindfulness-based interventions. And that's also because of the influence of Buddhism. And we will talk about that later. There's a whole movement called mindfulness movement. And of course, in the area of neuroscience, there's also big change happening, and particularly the neuroscience will usually, have a reductionist view when it comes to consciousness. The only understanding our consciousness as a brain states. But I think there's a trend now to have more deeper understanding the consciousness and try to see there's more than the physical brain structures. So there's a new understanding of consciousness happening there. And also the very important change is that in the Western science, the scientific method of investigation is always observing something outside of yourself. So the objective observation, and you experiment things, you put things together and you observe it. So always the observe is outside. It is usually considered valid or scientific when you observe something as an outsider. And whatever we think right here is not considered scientific or valid, because when we think, we have our emotions, our biases. So in Western scientific framework, it's impossible almost to have a subjective influence on the experiments. But now things are changing, because within the Buddhist tradition, for many hundreds of years, there's a technique has been developed to investigate the experience of the person by the person himself or herself, maintaining an objective awareness. So it's a whole different kind of investigation, what we call the first person observation of the experience. So now I think neuroscience is willing to accept the first person observation of the experience, like observing our own experience scientifically and analyzing our own experience, subjective experience that going on within us objectively. So there's a tendency now to accept the first person observation as a valid form of investigation, which was unprecedented in the Western science. So these are the changes, some developments happening. But of course, the main one will be the mindfulness movement. Of course, the John Kabat-Zinn, who learned meditation in that Inside Meditation Society I mentioned, and of course he traveled to Thailand and Burma also, I think. And then of course he's the one who created this this application of mindfulness, in particular in healthcare, and also for the stress reduction. Now, of course, nowadays there are so many applications of mindfulness. We don't have time to go to all these things. I just want to show you one book to show you how far the mindfulness movement has gone. And this book is called A Mindful Nation by a congressman, I can't say his name, Ryan, right?
Tim Ryan.
Tim Ryan, right? Yeah, from Ohio. So of course, and we talk about that mindfulness movement in our previous class also. It's almost like a movement, like mindfulness being applied to so many, areas. So that is a big, influence that Western culture got from Buddhism. So you can see this interaction happening. But so there are also critics about that. Remember in the article, there's a very positive message that wherever Buddhism has traveled, it has been shared by the local culture. We don't have to worry about that. That has always been the case. So now it has come to Western countries. It's definitely going to be different. So the author is telling us that we don't have to be worried about any changes happening to Buddhism. But there are some critics about that. I want you to pay some attention. Of course, there are so many good ideas in the Western culture that Buddhism can benefit. We saw in the article how it was benefited from the movement of I think just now Lucretia mentioned about the movement for gender equality. Buddhism benefited from that, and of course so many things. But there are also certain ideas that is unique to Western culture. Of course, now it's spreading all over the world, what we call capitalism. And also you can also go individualism. So there are some critics about the way that Buddhist ideas have been incorporated into Western culture is actually has been done in the service of capitalism rather than changing it. So here we have Buddhism is coming to Western culture, and so the Buddhism is changing Western culture. Western culture is shaping Buddhism. So we have this interaction. So which will get the upper hand is something that history will decide. But now it is in the making. So I think there are some critics about that. How sometimes meditation has been used by capitalist culture. So there's a recent book called Mac Mindfulness. Mac Mindfulness. So I would like you to listen to a interview, a very short, a short interview of the author of this book. I hope that you will benefit from that. Let me play that for you. I'm going to play only 4 minutes of that.
The great enemy of writing
okay.
isn't your own lack of talent.
Can you see my video?
Directions where I'd love to take you.
No.
Can you see my video?
No.
Not yet.
You can't see my video?
No.
Can you see now? Okay,
No.
okay, good.
Me either.
Okay, I think I will. Let me stop sharing the PowerPoint now. And then, okay. Okay, then I will share the screen again. So then I will choose the correct window. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes. You can hit play.
Okay. Can you hear him clearly?
Let's start with this. We have, among other things, seen the sort of mainstreaming of the counterculture. And you mentioned that when, of course, Buddhism is an ancient tradition, but as you say, when Zen became popular in the 50s and 60s, it was very much a counterculture tradition. But then a lot of things that come from the counterculture, 50s, the movement of the 60s and so on, a lot of those things became mainstream over time. Rock and roll became corporatized. Underground movies became more of an above ground phenomenon. Fashion, colors, breaking of old gender stereotypes. Everything sort of found its way into the maw of corporate hegemony, somehow it seems to me. So I guess, on one level, my reaction is, why would Buddhism be any different? Why wouldn't people also find a way, first of all, to market it? And then secondly, to use it to optimize, if they're not in the marketing of business, why wouldn't they use it to optimize employee productivity or whatever else? Was this just sort of an inevitable historical development, the way things have gone the last 60 years? What do you think?
I think you're right. We know how capitalism can take what's initially a radical idea and co-opt it and basically neuter it, tame it, domesticate it. So I think you're absolutely right. But I think we see with mindfulness a long process of decontextualization that happened over a period of 100 years or so. What we have now is basically an extremely stripped down version of mindfulness that's been separated and extracted from its ethical and moral context, and along with teachings that were meant to dissolve attachment to one's ego, and it's been turned around into a self-help technique, which can be done by using an app on your iPhone, for example. So it's quite different than its original purpose. And I think you're making a real good point, though, is we have taken an ancient spiritual tradition and recontextualized it within Western consumer capitalism. So you're absolutely right that these forces have been unleashed, and we've unbundled this practice, and we've allowed sort of the default mode of Western consumerism, individualism, basically this notion that mindfulness is a tool, it's a technique, it's ethically neutral, it can basically help you have, there's books out there on Amazon, for example, Mindful Sex, Mindful Dog Owners, you name it. So, maybe it is inevitable in some ways, the commodification of these practices. On the other hand, if we look historically, these practices do offer ways to cut through a lot of our worst human tendencies towards greed and anger and hatred, and basically a sense of delusion that we're separate from the world. So, these practices do have potential, but they've been neutered and denatured and turned into kind of a banal therapeutic technique.
Yeah, and again, we're talking with Ronald Purser, author of the new book, Listen.
Okay.
And Ron,
Okay.
it seems to me that
Okay, what do you think about that? It's so interesting because, when you read the article, it's almost like a positive message, So, Buddhism is taking nourishment from the Western ideas, Western culture. So therefore, it's going to be integrated into Western culture. It's going to live so well. I think that's true also. But then you have these, critics about, how exactly the way it has been integrated. This is not the whole picture, but this is particularly one practice of meditation and mindfulness has been, incorporated. What do you think? Do you agree with the author?
Bhante, I have an observation, and I think many times when mindfulness is separated from Buddhism, it loses a lot of the meaning that we give mindfulness from studying Buddhism. That mindfulness, to many people, doesn't have anything to do with Buddhism. It's something separated. And until you see it as part of Buddhism, you're going to have a different viewpoint of what mindfulness is. And I don't think we can make that separation. As we study Buddhism, we study mindfulness. It's not something that exists apart from Buddhism.
I think, yeah, that's the same point this author is making, you know, it has been decontextualized. But, you know, this is the point actually. The mindfulness as a human skill is something that common, and it's not specifically, you know, I mean, Buddhism cannot claim mindfulness. You know, it's an ability that, you know, all human beings have. So one tradition, one religion, one philosophy cannot own it. So it's a human capacity. But historically, this capacity has been used to develop moral behavior, to develop ethical behavior, to develop more relationship about, you know, among the communities. So that is how it has been used, and also particularly to, you know, eradicate our defilements, our, you know, self-centered ego. So that's how Buddhism has been using it. I think what has happened, so here is that, so the capitalism as individualism as let's say, I don't know, it's called Western ideas, maybe, you know, after industrialization, we have this, you know, tendency of capitalism, individualism, and those two tendencies now kind of, you know, appropriating Buddhist ideas. And that's the point here.
If I might, you know, I didn't, something that kind of pulls a lot of that together, talking about the 60s and the subject that we're discussing now, the Maharishi Yogi was hugely popular during the 60s, especially when he came together with the Beatles. And his transcendental meditation separated itself from Buddhist tradition. He kind of blended the, you know, the entire Indian and Buddhist philosophies of mindfulness meditation. And in my opinion, I mean, although it was wildly popular, it eventually kind of collapsed on itself because it didn't have all principles of the Buddhist philosophy and the spiritual aspects of meditation.
Yeah,
I think Mahesh Yogi was Hindu.
yeah, actually, yeah, transcendental meditation was coming from Hindu tradition. Yes.
I would like to, the whole idea of capitalism and mindfulness, in university, even the business professors would joke about the whole idea of having a college course called business ethics, because it's an oxymoron when it comes to capitalism. The idea of capitalism is to strive to constantly do whatever you have to do to make a profit, no matter what. There's no ethics. There's like I had a brother who actually, or a cousin who took a business class in high school, and the professor said, if you're not cheating, you're not trying hard enough. So the idea of mindfulness, you can be mindful, but it's like Sue was speaking, it's a different form of being mindful. Like, are you being mindful for like, and not in a like a Buddhist tradition where it's like not to hurt anyone and do things. In the end, it's going to be twisted, and it is definitely going to be something different. But even capitalism as itself is finding problems even in today's society and economy of what is happening. And it, in my opinion, I think it's going to collapse and turn into something different. And in that sense, I think Buddhism and even how you monks live and support one another is a good example of how maybe society should work together. So, but that's a much more advanced thing if people haven't studied economics. So
I think, yeah, we have one comment here, you know, like Sharon is saying that as a yoga teacher, she has been, you know, I mean, she is in the wellness industry for some time, and she has some experience in Chinese. So I think as her point is that, you know, in order for us to like, to get, you know, people interested in these ideas, we have to present it in a way that is sensible to them, that they can have some, is that what you are telling, Sharon? So if you don't, I think what she's telling is that.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so it's more like, you know, like a skillful means, right? I mean, we have to first present it a way that they can understand and they can use it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having a meditation app in our iPhone, right? Yeah, I think the problem is that, now we are making meditation more for individualistic practice rather than like a communal practice. So the element of community is missing in the way that it has been, it's been promoted. So, I mean, our focus is that how, like, so-called, like something individualism and capitalism, those, ideas of the Western countries, like coming and changing it. But I think, this is the period that it is in the making. It is in the making. So it's good to have a self-criticism, and then we can move forward. But I think,
Bhante,
yes.
I think that's what the coronavirus is doing. I think that we went from the 60s where we marched, we protested, we saw everybody going to be loved and honored, and we were going to take care of. And then we got TV, we got charge cards, which you didn't have at the time.
Okay.
We raised children to want more instead of sitting home with the family. And I've been feeling for years we were back to the hot pot of the 60s. And I think that's what the riots are causing. I think people are now coming back to community, taking care of, bringing food, which we didn't have, a lot of people didn't do before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think when it comes to, so I think meditation has become popular. I think it has become popular maybe because the way it was presented. The way it was presented, it's not a, I mean, it was presented as a technique, as a tool. I think that is why maybe many people accepted it, So I think, so in a way, there's also advantage of, presenting meditation as non-religious. But I think there are also problems if you just simply continue along that path, meditation as something that, that's as a tool, that what you call do by yourself, kind of do it by yourself, right? What you call that project? Do by
Self-help.
Yeah, do it by yourself, right? So that kind of project. And so ultimately, without our knowing, actually, maybe we are using the technique to, like, reaffirm our self-centeredness, like, losing our, sense of community, and also without our knowing, reaffirming the delusion that we have these problems started from the first place. Like, so the whole purpose of practicing meditation is to, like, make a transformation, the reduce our defilements and have more openness and compassion, and behave skillfully, in our family, and evolve ourselves spiritually. But if we if we don't incorporate a communal aspect to it, an ethical aspect to it, maybe we are using the technique, but without our knowing, maybe unconsciously, we are promoting. Maybe we can be promoting the self also. I think so. We have to understand both. I think the articles is helpful for us to understand the good picture, because it's normal. It has happened throughout the history. Buddhism has been, like, integrated to local culture, but in that whole process, we have to expect change. We cannot expect like Buddhism practicing in Thailand to be in the US. We cannot expect Buddhism in Sri Lanka to be in the US. Buddhism in Japan to be in the US. It has to be something unique to the US. But, what are the characteristics of that? Thank you. Yeah. And then maybe because I think because we are still in the period of the making, so as practitioners, we can contribute. We can contribute to this making. That's the point I want to make. We can contribute to this making, maybe making Buddhism, of course, being influenced by the Western ideas, particularly Western science and Western philosophy, Western psychotherapy. But maybe we are being quite cautious about capitalism and individualism, right? Yeah. Okay, I would like to so because today is going to be our last class. So I would like to do a small poll before we end the class. After the poll, I'd like to have some discussion about what you learn from this course and how do you think about the readings and the structure and everything and your feedback. So can we go to the poll, and then of course towards the end you can still you have opportunity to share. Okay, can we do the poll now? Okay.
Sure.
Okay, I launched the poll now. Oh, sorry. I think I enabled this wrong poll. Let me choose the right poll. Okay, so please take a few minutes to fill the poll. This is about the basic course structure and style, the time and the date, and
Is anyone else having difficulties hitting the submit button?
I am Dana. It's Sue.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, I can't submit.
Yes.
You have to scroll down.
I cannot submit.
You have to scroll down.
Okay. But submit button is there. Okay.
Yeah.
There are more questions.
All right.
Scroll down.
More questions.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Oh, there we go. Okay. You have to tab down. Then it'll allow you to submit. Did it work for you, Sue?
They want you to
Yes.
answer all the questions. Yeah.
Yes, it did. I got it.
Okay.
I should have given you a test actually instead of the poll. Yeah.
I prefer a poll way more than a test. Thank you, Nubante.
Then we tell you we just can't do it because it doesn't work on our end.
Liar, liar, pants on fire.
So Lucretia, so you are finding that you feel like you're having deja vu from the 60s to today.
Yes, I felt that in the past month. I've been having deja vu.
I've said the same thing to my husband because we've studied obviously the 60s and we love the music and
Well, we were Woodstock and we were Peter, Paul and Mary, and we were all, all those flower songs and protesting Vietnam, and somewhere along the line, I think TV came in, and I think our generation that still have it, that still want it, are, but I think we also came from a generation where I was one of the first breaking away from rigid thinking. I was told what to do, how to do it, what you did, from religion to home and so we broke away. And I think what we did is, there's an American saying, we threw the baby and the bath away at the same time. So we got rid of all of it. And I think synchronicity is forcing the world to bring global consciousness back and people to realize what is real.
So you are telling that in 60s, because of this cushioning of the mainstream culture, that it allowed other alternative explanation to come in, and now we are experiencing a kind of similar kind of change. And
we're going, to me, this is taking us back to where I mean, let's look at it, Bhante. In the 50 years, there is still as much racism out there as was before.
Okay.
So I think we're trying to educate people. We're trying to bring them on. We started it, but it stopped. And now, to me, synchronicity in the world is saying, or whatever you want, we're going to stick you in the house for 3 months, learn what you need to learn. That didn't work. So we're going to have the coronavirus. We're going to have the riots. So it's like in the Catholic story of Moses, they gave 7 plagues. Well, we're in the second plague. We better get it together.
Yeah, before it go all the way to the 7th. Okay.
You know, we better get it together and learn to take care of everybody. And that's what this is forcing. This is forcing us more, I think, Bhante, with your philosophy and the philosophy of a lot of the religions to take care of everybody.
Yeah, I think it's a good period. And that is why, because it is because of the coronavirus, actually, we were able to have this class also, right? So there
Yes, so if you look at it, it's, I think we're learning that there's more than money, because a lot of money's been taken away and people now are learning what real value is.
Yeah. Okay, so I would like to give you a few minutes. If you have any questions about the presentation I made, I mentioned about different people, different things. And if you want to know more about some people and have any questions, maybe I can give you a chance. Do you have any questions regarding the material that I presented to you?
Oh, good.
Thought you did a great job, Bhante. Thank you very much.
Okay, so.
Are you going to continue for another course, Bhante, now that you're locked down?
So I'm also getting similar questions here. And of course, maybe we can plan. Of course, we can plan, but I need some break also. There are things happening in our center. So definitely, we are also creating an online platform. Our, Dr. Gunawardana and others are, creating a more kind of, online platform that we can have more interaction and more sharing. So let's see. I will let you know. I will let you know in future. So maybe anyone who didn't speak, if you'd like to share what you like about the course and what you like to see in future, what kind of topics that you'd like to learn in future. So please let me know now.
I like the breaking up into groups. That was kind of fun.
Okay.
Bhante, I have a question.
Yes.
So, Bhante,
are you Mahesh? Who is this?
Yes, Mahesh Bhante.
Okay, yeah. Mahesh, yes, go ahead.
Yeah. You've probably seen the decline of Buddhism in India and now maybe the Southeast Asia. There's a lot of decline of Buddha because of lack of Sangha, and the people are not attracting to the Sangha. And it used to be like there is one person used to go to Sangha from each family during that time. But before my generation and upcoming generation, I don't think anybody is going to Sangha. So of course the Sangha is declining. So what is your thought on that? Like how, because without Sangha and without your presence here, we are unable to learn all these things. And I'm talking of the teacher and the Sangha, basically, it's very important.
Yeah. I think, that's common even in Asian countries, and you don't have many people who want to become monks. I think, and that's something that, we are experiencing. But I think what is happening in the US, and the Western countries is like, you have ordained teachers, but there are also development of teachers from the lay community. So the people, of course, so like, I think the role of like lay teachers, lay people who have, some advanced understanding, and also, of course, have to have, moral conduct and exemplary conduct, and they are becoming teachers. I think so. We have to, and if you're thinking about adapting to the situation, of course, I personally encourage, anyone to become, ordained and become like full-time, member of the, full-time practitioner. But I think in terms, adjusting the situation, maybe we need to think about how to train our lay community to become teachers.
I might, you had mentioned Thich Nhat Hanh during the presentation.
Yes.
And going to the point of the Sangha, I was very fortunate to become friends with a number of Vietnamese families back in the early 90s, and they got together and purchased a very large piece of property in a town called Batesville, Mississippi. And over the years, I was able to help them, and together we had put together this wonderful property that they eventually donated to Thich Nhat Hanh. And it's called the Magnolia Village, if anyone's interested and ever in that area. But Thich Nhat Hanh has came there to Batesville, Mississippi, and I was able to do it on a couple of occasions. It's a beautiful and growing Sangha that has made tremendous strides and become a thriving center for Buddhism in the Southeast.
Yeah, thank you. I think I have a few questions here. Okay, someone has suggested topic for future that someone's like to learn about the overview of Pali Canon and maybe study of some popular sutras. Yeah, I think Sharon has a problem about how the war, colonialism, and Sharon, can you explain what did you mean by that?
I haven't ever heard of
about Olcott, right?
Henry Steele Olcott before.
Yeah, I think
yeah,
you should know about him.
I'm wondering. Yeah, I'm thinking though about if his sort of initial connection was through war and colonialism. I'm just thinking that I don't have I don't have any knowledge about the sort of, is it war and colonialism that ended up providing?
He's working in the context of course, initially he was part of Civil War, but he was working in the context of colonialism. But he felt so much sympathy for people in the Asian countries because the Christian missionary groups are going and then converting local communities, establishing schools, and using their tool of education to like convert the local communities. So he felt quite he was empathized with the local communities, even in India, and he was helping Hindus also. So he traveled to those countries and helped the people of the local faith to like act to be more proactive and come up with to establish Buddhist schools. So he's going against the colonialism. He's using the facilities created by colonialism, such as steamships, travel facilities, and he is able to travel all over the world as a white person because he's white. So he has he can travel to anywhere he want to travel, but he's using the colonial context and privileges given to him as a white person, but he's helping the local communities. So I think in Sri Lanka, you can see statues of Henry Steele Olcott. There are so many streets named after him. And if you go to main train station, in more central train station in Colombo, and the main thing you see the statue. So it's for Sri Lankans, Olcott is a foreign hero. Okay. So any more sharing and or questions?
Thank you.
Yes, Barrett. Yes. Yeah, Barrett. Barrett, can you unmute your microphone, Barrett?
Sorry, I'm sorry. My question was, do you have an email address where we can contact you directly?
Oh, okay. So if you have any suggestions for future courses and or questions, maybe I will type my email address here. I mean, it's info@pittsburghbuddhistcenter.org. Let me type it here, info@pittsburghbuddhistcenter.org.
Thank you.
So you can send me your suggestions, your questions, or whatever, you know, anything that you like to read, just read. Then I have another one. I would like discussion, Achan Cha Forest. Oh, I think that's a good point here. Someone is mentioned about Achan Cha. Yeah, I did not mention about him. There's another key person who actually helped helped to promote Buddhism in the Western countries. That's Achan Cha. And he lived in Thailand. He never spoke English, but he trained so many Western disciples, and including Achan Sumedo, and also so many other monks living in the Western countries. Yeah, definitely Achan Cha from the Thai forest tradition played a very important role in bringing Buddhism to the Western lands. Yeah, that's a good point.
Bhante, I just want to.
Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was thinking like the Pittsburgh downtown, that Bhante, and there's so many other Buddhist religions. There's a nice group. I wonder whether there are things like that in other cities of United States. I mean, that's a very nice practice and a tradition.
There are some such tradition, but you know, let me tell you what I heard from the new Zen monk, Zen priest who came to our Zen center in Pittsburgh from Los Angeles, you know, from California. You know, in Los Angeles, they have so many Buddhist groups, you know, from like Chinese immigrants, you know, newly established Buddhist centers, so many Buddhist groups. So he was transferred to a Zen center in Pittsburgh. And then he told us, when we invited him for our Vesak gatherings, for our meetings, he told us that this is the first time that I'm sitting with the Buddhists of other traditions. He has been served as a Zen monk for more than 20 years in Los Angeles, but he had never had such a a gathering of different Buddhist teachers. But I think like places like Toronto and Washington D.C. And many and also many other places, you have such gatherings, and there are also Vesak celebrations happening. They also called Buddha Day. There are similar things, but it is new. It is new.
I'd like to say that I also really like that the Buddhist various communities do that and organize. And I like that you even reach out to other religions, Bhante, when it came to the Sri Lankan bombings, and that you work with the Unitarian Universalists and the other ones. And I think it's something good for everyone to learn.
Yes. Yeah. Of course, so we try to, I think this is a melting pot, right? So we try to learn from each other and have that melting pot. Okay, I think it has been such a great pleasure to be with you every Saturday. So I hope that we all have a good time. I think I got number of feedback for future courses. Someone even would like to have some assessments, some tests for future courses. I will think about that. I hope that you will not be afraid from that. Okay, so thank you very much, and let us conclude our meeting, our sessions. And I really appreciate your commitment to come to this class in the Saturday morning when you have so many things. Of course, Susie is joining in Saturday evening from Malaysia, not at morning. But I appreciate commitments that you all shown for this course. So let us take a moment to dedicate our learning, our practice for the benefit and well-being of all living beings. Okay, take a moment and think about, the time that you spent to learn the history of Buddhism. So we all want to and help each other to learn these teachings and help each other to overcome our defilements and our suffering and to be more compassionate, loving and wise in our living. So we gain some understanding how Buddhism has been traveled throughout the world and particularly in the Western countries. We also got some guidelines, as people who are making this whole Buddhism, how we would like to proceed in the future. So think about that and make a wish that may whatever I have learned today, may I be able to use that understanding to benefit so many people in this world. And may my knowledge, may my understanding help so many others. May all people, all beings be able to recognize their potential to become enlightened, their ability to overcome their discriminations, their prejudices, their biases. May they all be able to overcome those biases and discriminations and prejudices. May they all realize that the peaceful way to live, the happy way to live, is to take care of each other, have empathy towards each other. And may all beings be well, happy, and peaceful. Okay. Thank you, everyone. So one last message actually is from next Sunday, we are starting a special 3 months period, what you call the rainy retreat or Vasana period. So during these 3 months, we would like you to have more extra additional practice. We have prepared a special chanting card that you can practice every morning. So a nice chanting card you can place in the table. So we'd like to give you that card to use as a way of encouraging you to practice that recitation every morning. So there's a nice recitation you will do every morning. Maybe before your coffee, maybe after your coffee, maybe your tea. And so if you really like to have, okay, Kyoko, can you show that? Okay, you can see in Kyoko's hand. So behind the card, there's also a calendar that you can mark the days that you managed to chant, recite. So if you like to have this chanting card, we have enough of them, so we can post them to you. So please send me an email. So the email that I send you, like info@Pittsburgh Buddhist Center. So please send an email if you like to have a card together with your address. We will post it to you. Okay. Okay, thank you. So nice to see you all.
Bhante, happy 4th to everyone. Today is Independence Day.
Happy July 4th. Yeah, we should create a Buddhist ceremony to celebrate July 4th. So that's Buddhism in the making, right? Yes.
Integration in the making.
Yes.
There you go with the melting pot again.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you. See you all next time. Another meeting. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, Josephine. I like to see you, Josephine. Good to see you, Josephine, over there. Happy birthday, Josephine. Yeah. Happy birthday. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Tim. Thank you. Thank you, Barrett. Thank you, Grace.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Grace,
Thank you, Bhante. Okay, Nick. Yeah, hi, Nick.
Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Hi,
Bhante.
Clint. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. No, welcome. Yeah. Clint, I'm glad that you are able to join today. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, Bhante. It was nice to be able to get back with you guys live. Okay. So
yeah. Okay.
And Tess, yeah, I'm a glutton for tests, so bring it on.
Okay. So whenever next time when I hear the fire, fire alarm, fire truck, I will remember you.
I just might show up. You never know.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Hi, Deborah. Good to have you. Nebra, yes. So I'm glad that you still can join our class. You used to come to our Buddhist Center for our classes, right? So I'm glad that So is Jeffrey okay?
Yes, he is. In
Okay.
fact, I'm surprised he wasn't on this morning.
Okay, yeah. I called him a few days ago. He didn't answer, but I will try him again. Yes.
I'll make sure I tell him.
Okay. I think his name is here. I don't know whether it's there, but yeah.
Oh, I'll bet he is then. He's just not revealing.
Hi,
these things.
hi, Jeffrey. So yeah. Good to see you, Jeffrey.
Okay, this is what I look like in the morning.
So that's how you're close. Okay.
And Humphrey's in the corner. Enjoy.